Hello, in this educational module, we're going to examine two fundamental principles of European Union law, subsidiarity and proportionality.
Our main objective here is to give you a clear understanding of what subsidiarity and proportionality are, and to explain the crucial role they play within the EU's decision-making framework. We've structured this session into 4 parts. First, we'll cover the core definitions. Then we'll take a deeper dive into the subsidiarity principle, followed by the proportionality principle. And finally, we'll wrap everything up with a summary of the key points. So, let's begin with Section 1, the core definitions. You can think of these principles as the legal foundations that govern how the European Union is able to exercise its powers. First up is the principle of subsidiarity. This applies to policy areas where authority is shared between the EU and its member states, a concept we call shared competence. In these areas, the EU can only step in when it's clear that the member states can't achieve a specific objective on their own. The second key principle is proportionality. This one ensures that any action the Union takes doesn't go beyond what's absolutely necessary to achieve its goals. It really serves as a limit on both the nature and the intensity of EU measures. That brings us to Section 2, where we'll examine the subsidiarity principle in greater detail. At its heart, this principle addresses the fundamental question of whether the European Union should act in the first place. It's really important to understand the specific circumstances where the subsidiarity principle comes into play. It doesn't apply all the time. The application of subsidiarity is very precisely defined. It's only relevant within those areas of shared competence. So that means it does not apply where the EU has exclusive power, and it also doesn't apply to matters that are reserved entirely for national governments. Some good examples of shared competence are policies on the internal market, the environment, and transport. To make sure an action complies with the subsidiarity principle, it's assessed using a 2-part necessity test. Let's break down what those 2 parts involve. The first part is the national insufficiency test. This asks whether the objectives can be properly achieved by member states on their own, whether at a national, regional, or local level. If they can't, then we move to the second part, the EU added value test. This part determines if the objectives could be better achieved by acting at the Union level, perhaps because of the scale or the effects of the action. For any EU action to be justified, it has to meet both of these conditions. Now we'll turn to Section 3, the proportionality principle. If subsidiarity is about determining if the EU should act, then proportionality is all about governing how it should act, making sure any measures are suitable in scale. Now, a key distinction here is the scope of this principle. Unlike subsidiarity, which is limited to shared competences, the principle of proportionality applies to all actions taken by the European Union across every single area of competence. This quote really captures the core idea. The methods used have to be suitable for the goal, and they can't go any further than what's needed to reach it. The principle is therefore all about finding the right balance between the objective and the measures used to get there. To ensure compliance, any proposed EU action is checked against 3 conditions. First, the action has to be suitable for achieving the intended goal. Second, it must be limited to only what is necessary to achieve that goal. And third, the burden it places on individuals can't be excessive when compared to the objective being pursued. This comparison really highlights the key differences. Subsidiarity answers the question of should the EU act, while proportionality addresses how the EU should act. Their scopes are also different. Subsidiarity is just for shared competences, whereas proportionality applies to all EU actions. And finally, the timing is distinct. Subsidiarity is assessed before an action starts, while proportionality is considered during the design of the measure itself. And that brings us to our final section, a summary of the key takeaways on these 2 important principles. So, to summarize, you can think of subsidiarity as the if principle. It determines if the Union should step in when it comes to shared powers. Proportionality, on the other hand, is the how principle. It governs the intensity and form of the EU's action to make sure it's not excessive. Together, both principles work to ensure decisions are made as closely as possible to the citizen. They are absolutely fundamental checks on the exercise of power within the EU framework. This educational video is one part of a larger series on European Union governance. Additional modules are available for you to view in the corresponding playlist.